You can feel the pressure on the filmmakers to design a film that will speak to the widest possible audience, to reach people who may not know anyone who's died of AIDS. But the film pays a price for it. Heartfelt and stylishly made as this film is, it has, almost by definition, the feel of a movie made from the outside in. There will be no argument, however, about the film's stars. The superb Tom Hanks doesn't make a false move as the proud, ironic Beckett and moves us deeply by never begging for sympathy. Denzel Washington's every bit his equal, cocky and defensive. He gives us a thoroughly honest portrait of a prejudiced man wrestling with his macho fears. The film may not be what Demme fans expect, but it has the power to open more than a few blinkered hearts. And that is a review by David Anson in Newsweek about the 1993 film Philadelphia. Hello and welcome, and bring your tissues to Total 90s Recall as we talk about Philadelphia. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
This is the podcast where we are rewatching 90s films and asking ourselves, are these really as good or bad as we remember? And yeah, like I said, if you haven't gathered it yet, get those tissues together because we're talking about Philadelphia, the 1993 film starring Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. Chloe, was this your first time watching this film?
It was, yeah. And I have to say, I didn't really know anything much about it other than Tom Hanks is suffering from AIDS in it. I didn't even really know it was a legal drama, to be honest. So, I mean, I'd heard it was good. I had a vague awareness that it had won Oscars.
Oh, it wins some Oscars. This was my first time watching it as well. I knew it, in 1993 when it came out, premiered. It was a big talk during the Oscar season in 94. But for me, I was definitely known as like the gay AIDS film with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. That's like how I knew it. And so definitely I was 10 when this came out. So I definitely would not have watched this or would have been allowed to watch this in my household. And I don't know why I never came to it before now, but yeah, so this was a first time for me. And yeah, I liked it, but we'll get into more details after we get in our time machine of 1993. Like, Chloe, if someone has never seen this, what should we know about this film before going into it?
Yeah, so having now seen the film, I can give a bit of a setup for the plot. So basically, Tom Hanks plays Andy Beckett. He's this young, up-and-coming lawyer. He's only sort of in his 30s, and he's part of this very kind of old establishment law firm in Philadelphia. He is given a big case and a promotion at the start of the film. Then he is suddenly dropped from the firm and sent packing. And he strongly suspects it's because they've discovered that he is a gay man living with AIDS.
Well, and they say it's because he dropped the ball on a case, because suddenly some documents went missing, and then suddenly they appeared last minute.
But we know because we've seen a shot of him putting the damn documents on his desk, all neat and tidy. So he suspects that everything that he's been sabotaged, basically. And he then goes to a bunch of different law firms to find representation in a wrongful dismissal suit. They're all too, afraid to take on this big old establishment law firm. And then the last law firm that he goes to is sort of a bit of a rackety joint run by this TV advertising lawyer played by Denzel Washington, Joe Miller, who at first is not interested in taking on his case at all. He is clearly quite repulsed by having a gay man in his office. And essentially, a moment occurs in the film in which Denzel Washington's character changes his mind about representing him. And so then it's onto the case, and that takes up a lot of the film.
Yeah.
So that's the setup, basically.
That's the setup. But let's get in our time machine. Key stats. This was originally released in December 22nd, 1993. Small release before expanding nationwide in the U.S., I should say, on January 14th, 1994. In the UK cinemas, it was released on the 25th of February, 1994. Its budget was $26 million, but eventually grossed $77.4 million in North America and $129 million overseas. So it totaled 206 globally, and it became the 12th highest grossing film in the U.S. of 1993. So not too bad. Its director was Jonathan Demme. You might know that name from Silence of the Lambs. He would later direct Rachel Getting Married. But really, I mean, a seminal director. And like, if this was the only thing I'd ever seen of him, I would say an amazing director.
Yeah.
And then written by Ron Niswana, who also wrote Fellow Travelers. And it's cast, as we've already talked about, you have Tom Hanks as Andrew Beckett, Denzel Washington, Joe Miller, Jason Robards as Charles Wheeler, Mary Steenburgen, Antonio Banderas as Miguel, Joanne Woodward as Sarah Beckett, Robert Castle as Bud Beckett, and Dowd. Oh, I love a film with Ann Dowd. Jill Beckett, Charles Napier, who is the judge, Lucas. And then we have awards. Like, this is a huge juggernaut in awards. This was Tom Hanks' first Oscar win. He would literally get the Oscar the next year for Forrest Gump, but this is his first Oscar for Best Actor. It got Best Original Song for Streets of Philadelphia. It was nominated for many more BAFTAs, etc. It also, Chloe, you know I love it, MTV Movie Awards. I got a Best Actor nomination for Tom Hanks and Best Duo for Denzel and Tom. But Tom was up against himself in Sleepless in Seattle, which we talked about earlier in the year. So,
oh dear, he must have been disappointed about that after, he'd won an Oscar, but, didn't quite get that particular MTV.
Some alternative casting. Andy Garcia was considered, as well as Daniel Day-Lewis for Andrew, Tom Hanks' character. I don't think Andy Garcia is the right. I think Daniel Day-Lewis would do an amazing job with this. But I don't think it would have been as successful with Daniel Day-Lewis, and I'll get my reasons why I say that later. And then Bill Murray, William Hurt, Nick Nolte, and Tim Robbins were all considered for Joe Miller before it went to Denzel Washington. And then John Leguizamo was offered the role of Miguel that eventually went to Antonio Banderas, but turned it down. Do you want to, you'll never get it, but do you want to guess? It's a 90s game film.
Like, he turned it down in order to be in another film? Like, he had a schedule conflict?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, was it Super Mario Brothers?
Yes. Yes. So John Leguizamo could have played Miguel, but instead played Luigi.
Okay.
In the Super Mario Brothers. So,
truly iconic, clearly.
Truly iconic. So, Chloe, this is your first time watching it. What was your gut reaction?
I'll tell you what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a very kind of by the numbers movie that was Oscar bait.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it is that. But I think that there are choices with the direction that take it beyond that. And actually, I felt that from the very beginning, because you open with this quite naturalistic documentarian style. I was kind of quite taken by the direction. I felt like, oh no, this is going to be quite solid film that is actually taking some interesting choices. I think it doesn't hold that throughout. I think there are moments where it does feel a bit Oscar baity. It's not a film that I'm like, this is an all-time banger, but there's one scene, we'll talk about it later, which stands out, and I think I'm going to be thinking about that scene for a long time, and that's a really special scene.
Do you think it holds up?
Yeah, I do, because I think it holds up, but I also think it's very much a time capsule, and it's a film that was made to make a statement about AIDS and the treatment of gay men and AIDS sufferers at that time.
Yeah.
Behind it all, there's a slight sort of educational desire in the filmmakers. I didn't feel like it felt preachy. I just think, looking back, it feels very much like it's talking about a time which we've moved on from. In many ways for better, but nevertheless, gay rights and healthcare is never guaranteed.
Yeah.
So there may become a time, or it might be the case that it is becoming a time where some of these themes are becoming more relevant, shall we say.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I thought it was going to be a much more procedural than it was, even though it is quite procedural. That's not to say, but it was just like gut-wrenching. And like, to your point, when I'm looking at does this hold up or not, it doesn't. You said it. It's like a snapshot of what was happening in the 90s. And I think that is something we're going to get into in a minute, that I think everybody needs to educate themselves about what was happening in the 90s to gay people, but specifically gay men, which this film, touches on. And it made me think, Andrew is lucky to have his family. I think, the review hit the nail on the head when it was like, it looks like from the outside in, like his family is very, like, they're accepting, they're loving no matter what. And that's great. And I love that for him. But a lot of people today, and especially in the 90s, would not have been afforded that love that should be guaranteed and unconditional for your child and your sibling. So I thought it was in that sense, a fairy tale. Though, to be fair, like, this is why we watch films, right? To escape and have fairy tales and maybe aspire to something greater and to have an example of what a family should be. It also made me think of, I have friends who are a bit, like, probably a decade older than me. And I remember them talking about the AIDS epidemic. When I was 20 at the time, so they were probably in their late 30s when they were telling me about this. And they were just saying how, like, they lost so many friends, marched on Washington. And it just made me think about that. And that's why that's one of the reasons we're talking about this today, is it is Pride Month. Happy Pride, everyone who celebrates.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Because, I know typically with Pride, you might be thinking of like a more like happy film, but, Pride has a history behind it. If you're not aware, it commemorates the Stonewall riots from June 1969. The riots began when police raided the Stonewall Inn on St. Christopher Street in New York City after midnight on June 28th, 1969. And police raids on gay bars were routine at the time, but this time patrons fought back. Might I also add, it was a drag queen who led that charge. And the uprising stretched over 6 days. So the Stonewall riots are regarded as the galvanizing moment for modern LGBTQ rights movement. And so that's why Pride is in June. And so then like a year later, they have a parade, because that's another thing about the gay community. We need to celebrate and we need to love and we need to take note, because like in the AIDS epidemic, they're losing friends. They're, protesting in the day and they're going out and they are dancing at night, because you can't take the joy away, right? So I think that's important to remember when the world is on fire as it currently is.
I mean, maybe it's worth then to just talking a bit about where this film slots into that history, because obviously HIV, I think, was first identified in about 1983. For a long time, people have been dying of this mystery disease and no one understood what it was, and so it took a while for it to be identified. Oh, it's a virus, but people were afraid and they didn't understand where this disease, how it worked, and obviously there's lots of misinformation because of the fact that it was something that was popping up particularly amongst gay communities, and so there's just this weight of prejudice against gay men and sufferers of this illness, even though, as this film makes clear, it's something that's anyone can get it in the particular circumstances. But obviously it took a long time for people to understand that this is not a disease that is spread through touch. You have to have very close contact, blood transfusions. It can be passed from mother to child, and obviously through unprotected sex. It reminded me of the time when Princess Diana,
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah,
yes.
Who was the patron of the National AIDS Trust. She, in 1987, was filmed shaking hands with an AIDS patient in a hospital. And that kind of was like quite a watershed moment in Britain, because it was like proving, even a princess would have close contacts with an AIDS sufferer, and she's fine. So she was doing that to prove that HIV isn't spread through touch. But obviously in this film, the message hasn't reached Joe Miller, Denzel Washington's character.
No.
But I think it's really interesting. And also on that point, I think it was a film that does have this kind of educational aim. But in some ways, it worked. I was talking to someone, I'm not going to anonymize who. They were talking about their stepmom, and they said that their stepmom was quite kind of like, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve kind of a person. But one of the things that she loved Philadelphia, and it helped to change her mind about gay rights. So it goes to show that actually this was a film that changed people's minds, even though arguably, and we can get into it, it's perhaps a film about the gay community rather than for the gay community, you might argue.
Yeah.
And on that point, also, Roger Ebert kind of compared it in his review to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967, which is about interracial romance. But it was a Hollywood film that kind of, had a cause, and it was about breaking down prejudices and assumptions and using established stars to kind of draw those viewers in. It plays a cultural role, this film.
Yeah. Well, and I'm into that point. What we have to remember is in 1993, HIV infection became the most common death among persons aged 25 to 44. So, and in 1992, HIV infection became the number one cause of death among men 25 to 44. It is an education, and I think it's an important one. I think a lot of young people today are a little more cavalier with sex as far as like using, condoms and not. Whereas like gay men in the 90s and early aughts, like they're like, no, condoms are a must. And they're lucky because, we have PEP. HIV is actually, it's a livable disease. It's a curable disease. Like, I cannot believe we're here, but it is true. So many people fought and died.
To your point, I felt like it's such a wonder to think we're watching this 30 years on, more than 30 years on. And thanks to PrEP, thanks to screening, all of that, it's not a death sentence.
Yeah.
And so it isn't a nightmare disease that was going to take you young the way it was 30 years ago. But of course, it is in some parts of the world where they just don't have access to those drugs. It's kind of amazing to see how far we've come to some degree.
I also felt, again, there are some other fairy tales about this film. There's multiple doctors that are very understanding and very caring when it comes to Andrew and his partner, Miguel. You have the female doctor in the beginning, but also you have the male doctor when they're, I think, in urgent care or ER. And Miguel is like, he's getting upset. This is his partner. This is his practical husband, for all intents and purposes, having an episode, and they have to be rushed to ER, urgent care. And the doctor's like, who are you? And he said it very nicely, but he's like, who are you? And, Andrew's like, oh, yeah, he just takes all my medical records, And the doctor clocks like what that means. And he's like, you're not next to Ken, so actually I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. That wasn't the reality for a lot of gay people in the 90s, even up until recently. A lot of gay partners were just shut out. And because gay marriage wasn't legalized, they were shut out. So again, I love that they did that for them and these characters, but also it's not complete reality. And I don't know how I feel about that.
I would push back a little bit because actually in that scene where we first meet Miguel, I actually got the impression that the doctor is being a bit standoffish, because he literally says, I could have you removed from the ER. There's a slight sense of argy-bargy because Miguel's like getting quite anxious about trying to get the treatment or whatever. And the doctor is quite standoffish.
Yeah.
It's not very apparent, but I read it as the doctor is being a bit homophobic at that point, and is basically sort of laying down the law and being like, well, because you're not, an actual, in the eyes of the law, a partner.
Yeah.
I could have you taken away.
But then he still lets him stay.
He does. I wonder whether or not we're meant to read from that scene that he's treating him differently than he would a wife.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I think with the family, I mean, I did not love the scene in which Miguel and Andy are sitting around for, I don't know, Thanksgiving or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're explaining to the family, we're going to go ahead with this legal case. They go one by one and say, all the siblings say, oh yes, we totally accept your choice, and we really support you, and we hope that there's not. And it was really forced and really staged.
Yes.
And
there was one
buy
sibling who was like, I'm just worried about mom and dad. Like one sibling was like, I'm just worried about I'm sorry. If this was my family, everybody would like be talking over each other and like, well, no, you shouldn't do it for this reason. And like, no, we love you, but this like no, I completely agree.
In some ways, I didn't mind the fact that the family are supportive. I was quite surprised at the beginning. Yeah. In some ways, I was a bit relieved that we didn't have to also have a kind of, like it just would have been this whole other thing for it to explore. And actually, we've got the journey of a homophobic character coming to accommodation and understanding and learning to respect someone who's gay in Joe Miller's character arc. I was kind of quite relieved. I mean, I guess I don't. Yes. I'm not that wild about having loads of schmaltzy family scenes anyway. It's quite beautiful towards the end is. In the hospital and everything. So,
and to your point, from like a script and story element, you kind of just need it. Some things you need to make easy because he's already having to deal with this legal case. Thank you.
And AIDS. So yeah, he's got enough on his plate.
He's got enough on his plate. I think you need to have the family accepting. So then again, like people who are watching this in the early 90s can accept Andy as well. And it also helps that he's played by Tom Hanks, which we'll get to in 1 second. I did want to quickly bring up the woman who took the stand. I thought that was very poignant to have the women who took the stand who had HIV because she had a blood transfusion. And it clearly made, like, this is a case about the fact that not only does he have AIDS, but more importantly, he's gay. And you brought a gay man into the locker room, into the law firm, because they were so understanding of the woman because she got it through no fault of her own, because she's not promiscuous. She's pure.
It's quite an interesting aspect of the film. One of the things that really struck me as, watching it in 2026 is it's a film that very much is representing how people approached and thought about gay men and AIDS sufferers.
Absolutely.
Throughout it, Denzel Washington's character is saying some things that are quite confronting. They're quite bracing. Like, he's quite open in his homophobia and his disgust of gay men. And he plays on that in his address to the jury and is essentially saying, like, all us right-thinking normal people obviously disapprove of his lifestyle, but it's still illegal to discriminate against someone with AIDS. And we're going to make the case that this is what happened and this is why he was really dismissed from his job. And he's throughout the film, he's kind of prevaricating from being a firebrand for Andy. At one point, he even faces down some homophobic banter in the bar. Yeah. But then he's slipping back into his kind of defensive, don't touch me, disgusted homophobia. Yeah. He's absolutely furious to be hit on by the student in the drugstore. Yeah. He's a firebrand in the courtroom to the point where people think that he is Mr. Gay activist. And he makes all these statements outside the court, but then personally, he's still very got this kind of macho homophobia. but the thing about the disapproval of the reckless gay lifestyle that's kind of running through, there's references to homosexual facilities and deviant groups in one of the addresses to the jury. It is revealing how people thought then. But I don't think this film owns that view. And I think it's because of that woman who had the transfusion and caught HIV that way. She's called as a witness. She's making the case that she was treated badly for having HIV in the workplace by this same law firm partner. They sort of try to play this thing of like, yes, but you're an innocent. You contracted this terrible disease through no fault of your own. And she very pointedly says that she doesn't feel superior to Andy. And she gives him this very compassionate look. I feel that maybe the film could have relied on her awkward response to that line of questioning and then just had the look without needing to kind of spell it out.
Yeah.
But as I say, we're in 1993, so the film has to kind of really lay its cards on the table and be like, say what it thinks. I'm interested to know what you think about how the film handles the moment in the court when they expose, for want of a better word, the fact that Andy had gone to like a gay cinema and had sex with strangers. And to me, the emphasis on that moment is that it is an admission because it's the impact of this news landing on Miguel, because it's basically him admitting that he cheated on him.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it feels like it slightly dodges a bigger, more interesting question, which is that, obviously the defense lawyer is trying to play into the jury's presumed homophobia. But I guess, does the film do enough, or does it want to defend gay men's freedom to just have sex how they please? Like, it doesn't conform to our, traditional heteronormative standards, but like, this is actually unapologetically something that many gay men do, and why should they feel bad about it?
Exactly.
Is the film trying to be a little bit too conservative, like be like, oh, he was a bit naughty then, or is it being a bit more kind of like, no, he doesn't have anything to apologize for?
I think it's more the latter. I think, first of all, I don't think that's the first time Miguel is hearing that. Miguel, this has been going on for a long time. And so Miguel, obviously, they've had this conversation. It's more like, I feel like Miguel's, I don't want to say he's embarrassed, but it's like, oh yeah, our trash is being, taken out publicly. And I think what that scene is demonstrating is the use of the law firm, and the law firm is representing society as a whole, of, oh, these men deserve it because they're doing these promiscuous things, which like straight men do too, and straight women do too, right? But they're trying to use that. The law firm is using that. That's their case. I don't think the film agrees with it. I think they're trying to show what society was saying at the time.
Yeah, I think the film probably does take that side. I wonder whether it really kind of guns for it.
I think it does.
I think maybe it feels a little bit polite in its sort of treatment of gay. Like Andy at one point says, "I'm not political."
Yeah,
like he's very respectable in many ways.
And I think this is a good, because again, this is trying to be an educational, this isn't a political issue. This is like a health issue. And I think that leads perfectly on to what I want to talk about is like the performances. And I think, when you're thinking like the reason Tom Hanks works so well is because this is early 90s. I don't think he ever dipped, but if he has ever dipped, like this was his peak, right? He is beloved, and he's just a beloved actor and people like him. And so you need someone like Tom Hanks to play this role. I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis, like I said, he was a potential casting, or Andy Garcia. I don't think this would have done as well if it was anyone else but Tom Hanks or someone else similar to him. I can't think who else maybe in the early 90s who would be as good as him. And he is phenomenal in the role. Like there's a reason he won an Oscar. And I think, again, he sells it. He helps you feel bad for Andrew because you love Tom Hanks. So he's phenomenal, deserved the Oscar. And Denzel Washington is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I just was watching this and I am like, what I loved about this is actually Denzel Washington was very, when he's having, like, the baby comes, he's like, big and hype and all this, excited as any father would be. But then later, he's actually quite, like, there's some softness and some tenderness to him. And, the only award body to recognize Denzel Washington, other than for Best Duo at the MTV Music Awards, was the Awards Circuit Community Awards. They're the only body that also recognized him for Best Actor. And I thought Denzel was just so good in like his subtle way of kind of, we talked about already, kind of his disgust of Andrew. Yeah, I just love the performances in this film. I think they're really good. Yeah. What about you? What did you think of the performances?
Well, I mean, on Tom Hanks, I would say I think it is a really great performance. It's very restrained.
Yeah.
It's clearly one of those films where he really had to commit. The
Yeah.
film was shot chronologically because he was losing weight in order to show the decline in Andy's health. And I also have to say props to the makeup artist, because the way that they show him getting steadily more ill it feels very believable. It's a solid gold Tom Hanks performance. And Denzel Washington, I think the film wouldn't have its emotional journey, I think, without Denzel Washington. Andy does go through, he has to go through stages of denial about the way he's dying, all of this. But Denzel Washington brings that kind of firebrand energy. I think also what's really interesting in this film, and you mentioned that, I think Bill Murray was up for being cast in this role originally. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, he was considered.
I don't know if the role was originally written as an African-American role.
Yeah.
But I think it is actually really important that he is.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is, so you've got this moment in which he's in the law library, he's doing some work, and he is looked over by a sort of snooty clerk who's walking past. And you can tell what he knows what that clerk is thinking. That clerk is going, ooh, is this, less than smart looking black lawyer meant to be in my posh law library? Yeah. And then he overhears how Andy is being treated by the librarian, who has gone and got him some information about case law on this area of HIV discrimination. And he keeps on going, he's insisting, it's like, would you not be more comfortable in a research room? And Andy is dignified and he's going, no, I'm perfectly fine here. And you can see in Denzel Washington's mind, in his character's mind, he's like, oh, yeah, actually, the discrimination that he experiences as an African-American man is being visited upon a gay man with AIDS in a similar fashion. And that's the moment that he turns. So I think the race is really important.
Exactly.
And just another kind of really interesting thing, which I had not really appreciated. I was reading a really fascinating article in Sight and Sound magazine. I think it was originally published around the time of the film's release, but it was updated in 2017. It's by Amy Taubin. And she is talking about how I'll just read out this book because I think it's really interesting. The narrative of Philadelphia is less about being gay and living with AIDS than about being heterosexual and homophobic. Joe, so this is Denzel Washington's character's journey. Joe comes to understand how his homophobia, which he regards as integral to his manhood, underlies his fear and loathing for people with AIDS. But Philadelphia is a breakthrough film not only because it deals with AIDS and homophobia, but because it is the first major non-action Hollywood movie in which a black man personifies mainstream America. Joe's homophobia is a sign of his normality. He's a regular Joe. Andrew's white skin privilege is cancelled by his homosexuality and his disease. And I was like, that is such a key way to unlock the film, because when you kind of plug it into the racist narrative of America, if you know, for want of a better way of putting it, it's quite a watershed moment to have if this is true, that to have this black actor portraying the regular guy who's got to overcome his prejudice and to be a kind of audience surrogate. So I thought that is really interesting kind of moments in cinema in Hollywood, I think.
Very 90s. I feel like we got that a lot in the 90s. We're going to talk about some war films that I think the 90s did that, using African American, Black Americans as like the regular Joe. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's literally the definition of discrimination in that scene. And Andy's like, no, I don't want to go to this other room, because the guy's like, oh, would it make you more comfortable? And then he's like, would it make you more comfortable? And that is the definition of discrimination. And so that leads me on to kind of the amazing direction, and how like Jonathan Demme, prolific director, as I said, Silence of the Lambs, among other things, but how a lot of things are left unsaid in this film, which I think when things are left unsaid is when this film is at its best.
Absolutely.
Like when the partner was on the stand, how it went handheld, and I think it was Washington's apartment, like he's talking to his wife about the case, and it coming went handheld, and like there's certain moments that I'm like, oh, the direction's great when they left things unsaid. The only part that, if I could be a little critical of the film direction, is when Mary Steenburgen, she did her cross-examination of Andrew, and you could tell she hated doing this. Like, you could tell. And then she sits down and she goes, oh, God, I hate this case. And I'm like, I know that sounds minor, but I'm like, you didn't need that. We can tell that. And it was too much. For me, it was a little too much hand-holding of like, we get this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But I thought the direction was amazing. The storytelling was so good. And this film was at its best when it left things unsaid, and the times that it was trying to like handhold the audience was maybe the critical moments. I could be like.
It's like it's at war with itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
A bit like Joe Miller is.
Yes,
but when it's just holding the camera on the character's face, that's when the quiet moments of power come through. So I think it was really effective when we're first shown Andy's mother, played by Joanne Woodward, her expression when she's anxiously asking him how he is on the phone. And her expression says enough. And then there's a moment where the home movie stays on her. She's just been greeting her son, she's hugging him, and he walks away, but the camera stays on her. And her face drops, and that she's just filled with anxiety and sadness, because she knows she's so worried for her son, and it doesn't need to say that,
No.
or the moment when it sort of slowly closes in on Miller when he hugs his wife in bed, and he's clearly meditating on his very sort of sad, strange evening with Andy.
Yeah.
It's got this quiet power. And that, actually reminded me of Joachim Trier's handling of performances in his films like Sentimental Value or The Worst Person in the World, that he trusts the audience and the performer to just hold the camera on the performer's face. And you just know it's almost like cinematic mind reading.
Yeah.
As a viewer, you understand what all the thoughts that are racing through that character's head, because we know what we've just seen them go through.
We're human. We are human. And I feel like, a lot of films today, maybe it's because people are scrolling and, people are on their phones. So as Netflix has put this edict out that you need to repeat the plot of the film every so often, I feel like a lot of filmmakers today do not trust the intelligence of the audience. Whereas, like, I feel like a lot more films in the 90s in this film did.
And I think that's because you were probably expected, most people would have been seeing this film on the big screen in a darkened theatre with no distractions. You can trust the audience. There is nothing else competing for their attention. I mean, I just want to say a little bit about Jonathan Demme's other shot selection, because I think there's some really interesting stuff going on. As I mentioned, the opening montage, it's quite documentarian. You've got
I
shots
love the opening montage.
Yeah, you've
it
got
made me want to go to
people.
Philadelphia, which I never thought I would say.
I don't really know about Philadelphia other than what I've seen in this film. But, it's got shots of different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
It's got the poor and the rich and the middle class and the new and the old. It's got people in shops. It's got guys at the harborside, commuters, firefighters. Some of them are waving to the camera. So it's like they're aware of the camera. It's its own little sort of mini film. And you've got this Bruce Springsteen song, which was written for the film, soundtracking it. And so it's like, it's very 90s in that it is a montage that sets up the location. The other thing I thought was very interesting is that Jonathan Demme does a lot of really quite close-ups on faces, and it gives it an intensity that I did not expect. Particularly, just as an example, when Hanks is given a promotion and he's in the partner's fancy office with the Chesterfield sofas and the cigars, and there's face-on shots of these partners or these old men, and they are smiling, but it's almost like they're grimacing, they're leering, and of course that is the moment when they spot, or one of them spots, the lesion and sort of clocks that he's got AIDS. And it's a film about the fear of infection, so there's something quite tactile and intimate about those close-ups, and I just thought that was a really interesting approach that I didn't expect going into the film.
Another thing I like about that film, or that scene, is Andrew's the only one actually not smoking a cigar. He's holding it, but he never lights it.
Can we talk about one other amazing thing? The standout scene in the film, to my mind, is what I'm going to call the Maria Callas sequence.
Yeah.
And basically what happens is Tom Hanks, he's meant to be going through his Q&A questions for his taking the stand in court with Joe, but he decides instead to play an aria sung by Maria Callas, and he turns up the music. And the way in which this scene is constructed just has this really kind of it's brilliant. It's standout. Basically, what happens is that he's swept up by the music, and he's so transported. The camera seems to kind of float free and look down on him. It takes this really high angle looking down on him, and then the lighting transforms. It becomes non-naturalistic. It darkens, and then suddenly there's this red glow that's like he's on stage or like he's in another place. And we're still in the world of the film, because we're still seeing the reaction shots of Joe, who's watching him quite, I think, mesmerized.
Yeah.
But it's strange. It's the camera angle, it's the music, and it's the lighting. It's quite surreal.
Yeah.
And it really struck me as being a very, quite a different attitude and approach and style to the rest of the film. And that was, to me, the moment that I will think of about this film.
Yeah, it was the most surreal moment, and I was kind of like, what is the point of this? I also, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I also was curious, what is Joe, Denzel's character, thinking right now? He's mesmerized. Is he realizing life is futile and fleeting? And that's why he reacts the way he does. Is he pitying? Does he feel sorry now for Andrew? Is he almost like, there were almost other times I was like, is he turned on by him? So yeah, it was a really interesting, surreal scene, and a very procedural, not very, but of a film that's half in a courtroom.
My feeling is that he is entering into Andy's world, and that he finally fully sees him as this fully rounded person with passion. And when he goes home, he's kissing his baby daughter, he's hugging his wife, and he's sort of thinking, there, but for the grace of God, go I, kind of thing. I think that's his Damascene moment in many ways.
Yeah. So, Chloe, what aged well or what aged terribly for you?
I think it's aged well. That earlier comment I made about how I think it's a bit of a time capsule. It's very much a film of its time, but I think that it's the way in which it treats gay men. Although I feel like it's perhaps a film that is about the community rather than for them to some degree, in as much as, like we never see Andy and his boyfriend kiss. There's still this understated passion. There's care between them.
Yeah.
I think it treats them with dignity, foregrounds the gay community and their solidarity. Interestingly, they cast a lot of AIDS positive actors in the film. And according to the American Film Institute, there are 53 AIDS positive actors, and 43 sadly died within a year of its release. So it is representative of them. It's just that I think that it's, going back to Amy Taubin in Sight and Sound magazine, she said Philadelphia stops short of confronting straight viewers with the kinds of images that might trigger their homophobia. And I think that is true. Ultimately, it's still a film that is quite accurate representation of its time. And I think its themes about confronting prejudice have aged well overall.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. And I'll also add that there were scenes with Miguel and Andrew being a bit more affectionate, and those were cut. So there you go.
That was a choice.
That was a choice. That was a choice. But yeah, I think, as you already said I think it did age well. And I think it's an interesting, as we look at it with a 2026 lens, just to reflect on that of like where we've come and where we've been. And I think this is an important film for young people to watch, especially
or
young
old
gay people. Or old people. Yeah, I think it's an important film for anyone to watch and realize, we can't take anything for granted.
Old people like us, Molly.
Old people like us, because it was our first time watching. So for me, when I'm looking at the most 90 moments, lines, or scenes, all the music, specifically the streets of Philadelphia, like as soon as that came on, I was like, yes, the 90s are in my home right now. They have entered. That was just very 90s blaring. I don't know about here, but in America, that permeated through the 90s. To the streets of Philadelphia.
I didn't know the song, but I feel like, it's got Neil Young and it's got Peter Gabriel on the soundtrack. So it is very 90s.
Also the hard copy of the brief, and he had to like print it out and put it, on there with his nice computer that's yellow and black, or not yet, like green and black. And then I love in the first scene we see Joe and Andrew. And then they're going back to the elevators and they're taking notes on their tape recorders.
Oh, yes.
I love it. If that was now, obviously it'd be on their phones or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was all very, very 90s to me. How about you?
Well, I certainly second you on the boxy IBM computers. I like the fact that the file directories are those blue screens, and you have to kind of move the cursor along in order to find a file in somewhere. Very 90s. I thought the sets, we always say it, but say it again, they show character. Andy's got a loft apartment. I mean, I think both men have wonderful kitchens.
Oh,
beautiful. Yes. I was absolutely loving the kitchen in Joe Miller's house. Lovely. And then, he's got this very cluttered office versus the kind of expansive, kind of polished boardroom table in the law firm's offices.
Yeah.
So those were great. And then also the chunky knit jumpers. There's just a lot of chunky knit jumpers. And I thought to myself, why don't men wear chunky knit jumpers anymore? I think they should.
They should.
I think they should.
Bring it back.
Yeah. Being cold is not a look.
No, it's not in style.
No.
I want to give an award to Best Rebound from a Birth to Joe Miller's wife. I forgot her character's name. But dear God, that woman A week later, we see that woman, and a week later, we see them in the kitchen, and she's like just had a baby, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
what the hell?
She's cooking.
She's cooking. She looks well rested. She has on makeup. She's clothed in like a normal person's clothes. She's not still in her pajamas. She's not wearing all black to hide the fact that her child has spit up on her, or she hasn't bathed in 2 days. Like, she looks amazing. So well done her, but also poor standard setting for women everywhere around the world.
Yeah, I hadn't realized the baby was quite that young, but yeah, I think she's definitely got it together, hasn't she?
Yeah.
On that note, she manages to pull together a costume for a last-minute party. Yes. And I thought I would give awards to the best costume at that party.
Well done,
which
yes.
is Tom Hanks and Antonio Banderas. They are wearing naval officer suits, and they look like Richard Gere in An Officer and Gentleman. and it's quite rather lovely.
That has to be their inspiration, right? That has to be what they're doing.
I heard that Jonathan Demme sort of wanted to point up the idea that there are gay men serving in the military. I don't know if that really comes across, but they look very dapper.
Yes. Officer and Gentleman was 1982. So yeah, they're totally ripping off that. I love it.
A dishonorable mention to Joe Miller's crap costume, which is a lawsuit. It's a suit covered in pages out of a law book. And he has to explain it to everyone.
Can I just tell all the straight men out there, when you go to a gay Halloween party, you need to up your game by 1,000%. I mean, there was Mona Lisa there. I mean, it is literally gay Christmas. So if you're going to go to a gay Halloween party, first of all, you've hit the jackbox. Congratulations. You're going to have the best time of your life. And secondly, up the game. You can't go as a lawsuit.
But I think it's very much, it's another bit of his character, isn't it? That
totally.
He doesn't want to amp things up. He's a straight man. He doesn't dress up. No. Yeah. I also really like the cover of Talking Heads' Heaven in the party, which just like that.
Okay, so Chloe, if somebody liked this film or didn't like this film, what would you recommend? Like, whether it's a vibe, an actor, theme, director, I don't know what.
So I've got a few. Okay. I just want to say I mean to watch Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I want to watch that because it feels like it's a touchstone for this picture.
It's so good. I haven't watched it in decades, but it's so good.
I definitely want to check that out. So I was trying to think of campaigning and legal dramas.
Yes.
I decided to settle for Erin Brockovich from 2000, directed by Steven Soderbergh. I think just because it's about a plucky outsider standing up for what's right. So a little bit like Denzel Washington's character to some degree, even though obviously he is a lawyer. It's also a film in which it's kind of centered on a career best performance from an established movie star. So Julia Roberts. And it's based on a true story. In this case, it's about a woman mounting a legal case against a sort of gas electric company which was contaminating the local water supply, and everyone underestimates her. And so it's got that firebrand, I know what's right, David and Goliath aspect to it. Then in terms of, I was trying to think of a film in which the main character is ill. And I realised I hadn't watched many films in that case. But I did think of Bright Star from 2009, directed by Jane Campion. And this is actually a historical film. It's about John Keats. He died at 25 from tuberculosis. It's sort of actually one of the few films that has left me sobbing in the cinema. And I think for me at that time, it just captured the kind of all-encompassing love between Keats, played by Ben Whishaw, and Fanny, played by Abby Cornish, and just this tragedy of dying young from an incurable disease. And both this and Philadelphia, to me, it's strange to watch them because these diseases are treatable now. And so we're watching a film in which a protagonist is succumbing to death, knowing that if they'd lived in another era, they'd have survived. A couple of films that I think are much better in terms of being out and proud in the way they portray gay lives. So Moonlight from 2016.
Oh, so good.
Directed by Barry Jenkins. I love it. I mean, beautiful, beautiful film. I think it's inspired by a play. and perhaps it shares some DNA with Philadelphia, but it basically explores the experience of being African American and gay in a very kind of tough, poor area. The main character, Black, is reacting to the kind of similar issues or ideas of masculinity and therefore homophobia that Joe Miller is wrestling with in Philadelphia. But his problem is that he knows he's gay, and so he's self-hating because of this. And it's got beautiful romance and it's got incredible performances, amazing. And then lastly, I thought I'd highlight Queer from 2024, directed by Luca Guadagnino. It's based on William S. Burroughs' novel or novella. It's an increasingly surreal drama about an aging gay journalist writer living in Mexico City in the 50s. He's hard drinking, he's addicted to pills, he's self-deceiving, he's a complete mess, and he becomes obsessed with Drew Starkey's character, who may or may not be interested in him. And this character is played by Daniel Craig. So just an amazing and very unexpected performance. And there's this wonderful, bizarre trip sequence in the jungle. Leslie Manville, bizarrely, is in it, but amazing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's bizarre. And it has, if you like the surreal scene in Philadelphia with Maria Callas, Aria, I think you'll love this. I don't know if either film is exactly camp. Like, I think they're too dark for that. But Guadagnino has said that Queer was inspired by the Red Shoes in that sense. So like he was really going for this kind of intense, over the top operatic, surreal aspect that Powell and Pressburger were creating in their time.
Nice. Oh, so good. Well, one of my recommendations, you already said, Aaron Brockovich, 2000 film. So we won't cover it on this podcast, but
sadly,
I know, but we can appreciate it. So definitely go watch that. You summarized it very well. I would add Dallas Buyers Club with a big asterisk, which I will get to in a moment, from 2013. It tells the kind of truish story of Ron Woodruff, I think is his name, played by Matthew McConaughey. This is the film that he won his Oscar for. And he's kind of a hard-living Texas electrician diagnosed with HIV in 1985 and given just a few days to live. And he smuggles unapproved treatments from abroad and sets up a buyers club to sell them to fellow AIDS patients while fighting the FDA. I say the asterisk because Jared Leto also won Best Supporting Actor for his role as a fictional transgender woman who becomes Matthew McConaughey's character's unlikely partner. Yeah, peaks and troughs. I think Jared Leto's portrayal is problematic because, he's a man playing a transgender woman. But other than that, I think it's another film that is showing what people of all sexual orientations were dealing with during this epidemic in the 90s and 80s. I would also say, it just came to me while you were talking, Chloe, Milk in 2008. It's Gus Van Sant's biopic of Harvey Milk, the gay rights activist who became California's first openly gay elected official before his 1978 assassination. Sean Penn won an Oscar for it. And my other film I would recommend, I've said it before, and I think it's just because I love it so much, guys. I'm probably going to say it every time we do a law film. But Anatomy of a Fall from 2023. Sandra Hüller is in it, who you might have seen recently in Project Hail Mary. But, it's a procedural, but it's very much what I think is interesting about it. This actually was filmed in an actual Philadelphia courtroom, and to courtrooms that I've been to, or even when you watch other courtrooms, the lawyers are up, but apparently in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, the lawyers have to sit down, which I thought was really interesting. And that reminded me of Anatomy of a Fall because you see how the French court system works, which is much different than like a British or American. It's also dealing with defendants. Or I guess in Philadelphia, he's the
claimant.
He's the claimant.
Yeah.
But people who, they don't fit society's mold. So again, if you haven't watched it since the last time I recommended it, or this is your first time listening to Total 90s Recall, go watch Anatomy of a Fall.
It's a great film, yes.
So good. So that's it. That is it for us at Total 90s Recall. We hope you have enjoyed this. Are you going to go watch Philadelphia? Have you rewatched it recently? Please let us know. You can let us know either on Instagram at Total 90s Recall. That's Total 90s Recall. You can email us if that's your thing. We love emails. Total90srecall@gmail.com. You can also comment on our YouTube. We've been getting great comments on that YouTube. You can find us Total 90s Recall. And please, wherever you are listening to this, please give us a like and a review, 5-star ratings, because that really helps our discoverability. If you didn't like this, well, just keep it to yourself and maybe email us for your feedback. And the next time that you are in a riot or a protesting for human rights, you tell everybody about Total 90s Recall. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
And we'll see you at the movies.